Today, I am making my mum's signature meatball recipe. This recipe has been in our family for over 100 years, so you cannot go wrong with it. And as a bonus, I'm gonna show you how to turn it into the most delicious meatball sub and how to serve it with a beautiful marinara sauce. To make the most delicious meatballs, there are a few things that you need to know and that you have to follow when making them. And the first is using bread that has been soaked in milk. So I bought this sandwich loaf yesterday and I just laid it out on a baking tray to get it to be that crispy, stale texture, because we're gonna soak it in some milk and that's gonna give you a moist, beautiful meatball. And this is 6 slices of just plain white sandwich loaf. So just roughly chop it. You can also just tear it apart with your hands as well if you like. I'm just gonna put it in a bowl. And we wanna do about 1/4 to 1/2 cup of full cream milk. And you wanna do it just so all of that bread gets soaked up by the milk. So just get your hands in there. See, that's already been fully absorbed, so I just want to get a little bit more. You want it to be quite wet. I'm just going to set that to the side while I prepare the rest of the meatball mixture. Now there is a lot of flavor in these meatballs. You are going to need some pork mince and some beef mince. I usually like to use a mixture of beef, pork, and lamb. I think that lamb and pork just beautifully flavors the meatballs. Or as Vinny says in Goodfellas, you've got to have the pork because the pork is where the flavor's at. But I couldn't get my hands on lamb mince today. It's actually a little bit hard to come by at the moment. So we're just gonna do a 50-50 mixture of beef and pork. And as I said, I am making these meatballs in batch. They are the perfect thing to store in your freezer. So I just like to roll them all up, not cook them, and then store the uncooked meatballs in my freezer for when I feel like spaghetti and meatballs, a meatball sub, or just some plain meatballs and some sauce. All right, so we've got all the beef and mince in there, and then I'm just gonna heavily season it with a lot of salt and a lot of pepper. My mum always says to go really, really hard on the pepper in this recipe. So we're gonna be here for a while cracking this pepper in here. All right, that's looking good to me. My mum would probably be saying, Dane, add more pepper, but I think that's a pretty good amount. It's probably about 1 to 1.5 teaspoons of freshly cracked black pepper. And then we're gonna need a cup of grated pecorino romano. And I know that sounds like a huge amount of cheese, but just trust me on this one. You can never go wrong with cheese, and it's gonna beautifully flavor those meatballs as well. You can also use Parmesan in here as well, or Parmigiano Reggiano, just to give it a little bit more of that sharp cheese taste. Although I really like going with the Pecorino Romano because it's just got a little bit of a softer or milder taste. It's a workout doing the cheese. And then we are going to need 1 clove of garlic. And I know that sounds a little light on for garlic for me. You can up it to about 2 or 3 or even 4 cloves if you like. But we like to do a little bit more of a milder garlic taste in our meatballs. Actually, they're quite small, and I am going to do 2 cloves, and I'm just going to microplane those in there. All right, so we've got our garlic in there. I'm just going to pop that to the side because we're going to need to really finely dice 2 brown onions. So I'm just using a sharp knife, and I'm going to create that grid-like pattern on my onion, which is going to help me finely dice it. And this is another one of my mum's little secrets when making meatballs, because she has tinkered with this recipe over time, and the more onions the better. She said it just flavors it really beautifully, but you do have to very, very finely dice them or even grate them just to get that texture right with the meatballs. All right. Oh, that onion got me very good. My eyes are watering. All right, so those finely diced onions are going to go into our meatball mixture. And then the last bit of chopping that we need to do is some parsley. So you do want a fair bit of parsley. This is just gonna add that beautiful freshness to your meatball mixture. So I'm just gonna finely chop these with a knife. And you'll notice that I didn't pick the parsley leaves off the stems because that is one of my most hated tasks. And if I don't have to do it, I'm not going to do it. And this is one of those cases where it's perfectly fine for there to be parsley stems in your meatball mixture. All right, that is looking pretty good to me. You could cut it a little bit finer if you want, but I think that's pretty good. And then we're gonna add that into the bowl as well. And then we just need 2 eggs cracked in here. And last but not least, our milk-soaked bread. So you'll see that that is at a really soft texture, and that's exactly what we're looking for, because this is going to make those meatballs moist and give it that beautiful texture. And then I'm just going to use my hands, which are clean, to just mix it all together. So there is a lot of squeezing and a lot of mixing. You can wear gloves if you like, but I'm just making this for my family and I. So I am going to get in there. Plus, I think when I'm making food, I always like to be able to feel it. I can tell straight away if this needs more milk, more bread, more eggs, less moisture, just by touching it. And it makes that beautiful, or not beautiful, to some squishing sound. And you'll notice that that bread has just melted into that meat mixture. All right, I'd say that's looking really good. And there you have a really well combined meatball mixture. And then we'll roll them up. And that's our meatball mixture done. We've made our meatball mixture, so now we're going to roll it up. And I just use my hands for this. So I get about, that's a little bit big, about a tablespoon of mixture. And then I just roll it in my hands into a rough circle shape, just till it looks like this. And you can make them to any size that you please. If you want them to be a little bit smaller, by all means make them a little bit smaller. If you like your meatballs to be a little bit more on the bigger side, then go right ahead and make your balls bigger. But this is sort of the size I like them to sit at, which is, I would say, about a tablespoon of mixture. You can also do those really little mini meatballs and put them in a soup if you like. These would be delicious in that. And again, I know I keep saying it, but this is why it's so great to make this meal in a large bulk, because this is 1 kilo of meat and it's also got that bread and all that other filling mixture in there. It is going to feed a lot of people, but I love making a lot of it. And a little trick when rolling your meatballs is just to slightly damp your hands with some water, and that just means they're not going to stick and they're going to form into that shape a lot easier. And there's all my little meatball babies rolled out, although some of them are a little bit on the larger side. But as I said, it doesn't matter if some are bigger and some are smaller. It's not going to impact it too much. You might just have to cook some a little bit longer or a little bit less than others. So I'm going to pop these in the fridge uncovered while I prepare the sauce, because that's just going to allow that meatball shape to rest and hold its structure when we cook them, and they're not going to fall apart. To go with our meatballs, you need a really great tomato-based sauce. So I'm going to show you how to make a quick marinara sauce that is going to go beautifully with these meatballs. And as I said, I'm also going to show you how to serve it in a meatball sub. But if you wanted to bulk this recipe up even more, you can toss some spaghetti through the sauce and then add the meatballs on top. So to get started, I've got these beautiful ripe tomatoes that I've had sitting on my counter, I think, for about 10 days. So I'm just making a crust-like score at the bottom of them because I don't like tomato skins in my sauce. You can absolutely leave the skins on if you like, but by doing this technique, it's just going to mean that that skin's going to easily fall off the tomato, because we're now going to put them in a bowl and I'm going to cover them with boiling hot water. And I'm just going to leave that sit for about 5 minutes, and then this sauce could not be easier to whip up. The last little bit of prep work that we need is just to peel a few garlic cloves. And I'm not going to chop up the garlic, even though you could if you would like that. I'm going to leave the cloves whole, and it's just going to beautifully flavor the olive oil. And then we're going to take them out, and we can even smush them up and then toss them back into the sauce. And it's going to have that beautiful, almost garlic confit flavor that you all know I love so much. And the only other things you need for this sauce is some tin whole peeled tomatoes, lots of extra virgin olive oil, a little bit of salt and black pepper, and some fresh basil if you have it. Okay, I think these tomatoes are ready to be peeled. Probably could have done with a little bit longer, but they're so ripe that, look at that skin. It just peels right off. And you don't need to use fresh tomatoes in this sauce, but I always like to do a mix of tinned and fresh. It's also another one of my mum's little secret tips, is to always do a mix of the fresh and the tinned. It just gives it a little bit more of a lightness to the taste of the sauce as opposed to that heavy, rich tomato flavor, which if that's your jam, then totally go with it. But we always like to balance it out with some fresh overripe tomatoes. And then I'm just going to roughly chop these. All right, and that is all our prep work done. Now we're going to go over to the stove and I'm going to show you how to whip up this sauce. All right, so I've got a big Dutch oven pan on a high heat, and I'm going to add a very generous amount of olive oil. I think I say this every time I'm over here and cooking something, that you need a generous amount of olive oil. And I think I've done about 3 tablespoons there. So I'm just going to get that hot. I'm going to throw the garlic in, and then I'm going to turn the heat all the way down to low because we don't want that garlic to burn. And as I said, I keep my garlic cloves whole because I'm just using them here to flavor that olive oil, and they're going to cook in a different way as to if they were crushed or sliced or finely diced, because this is just going to give that more sweet and mild garlic flavor doing it this way. And you just want to cook them until they've slightly become golden, not brown. That's going to change the flavor. You just want them to have that slight golden flavor. So I'm going to move it over to my smaller burner, just because I don't want that oil to be too hot when I add the tomatoes into it. Otherwise it's going to splatter all up at us. So we're just going to put it on quite a low heat. And you'll see that I've left the garlic cloves in there. Sometimes people would scoop them out at this point, but I'm going to leave them in there and cook them with the tomatoes, and then I'll scoop them out and smush them down because they'll have that beautiful confit texture. This is a different brand to what I'm usually cooking with. I hope they're nice. All right, so I'm just going to get that in there. Oh, see, that's really hot still. This is why you don't want your oil too hot, because it'll splatter up exactly like that. I'm just going to let the oil get a little bit cooler. Actually, I'm going to start by putting the fresh tomatoes in because that's going to cool that oil a bit quicker. And then I'm going to drop the tinned tomatoes into my hands because I want to crush them up. So really crush them with your hands. And I filled those tins of tomato up with water. An old nonna tip is never leave any of that tomato paste or that tomato sauce in the tin or bottle. And a way to do that is to fill it up with water, give it a little swirl. I'm going to pour that in. And that's also going to allow that sauce to have a little bit of room to breathe while it cooks. And it's just going to allow all those flavors to beautifully combine together. So it needs a fair whack of salt, a little bit of pepper. And depending on what tomatoes you're using, you might also want to add a little bit of sugar, but just give it a bit of a taste before we do that, because these tomatoes were so ripe and sweet, I think we'll be fine without it. And then we're going to bring it to the boil and cook it for about 20 to 30, even 40 minutes, depending on how long it needs, just to thicken up and to get all those flavors combined. All right, that sauce has been on the stove for about 30 minutes. It's looking like it's at a good consistency for me. So I'm just going to scoop out those garlic cloves. All right, and then I'm just going to get my knife. Oh, look at that. Perfect. And we're going to put that back in. And then this is at a point where we could get out a food processor, a blender, or a handheld mixer and make it a little bit smoother. But I'm just going to use a potato masher because I actually like my sauce a little bit on the chunky side when it comes to the texture. But I am going to break those tomatoes down even further. And then I'm going to throw in some fresh basil leaves. Just a few, I don't want too many here. That is looking really nice. And now I'm going to turn that down to the lowest heat possible and just keep it on a very, very slow simmer, because now I'm going to fry up those meatballs and then pop them in that sauce. All right, we are going to fry up those meatballs in a little extra virgin olive oil on a high heat. And this step isn't to cook the meatballs. This step is to create flavor within the meatballs. So we're just gonna get a beautiful caramelized base on both sides because we're gonna flip them over. and then we're going to finish cooking them off in the sauce. Now, I know a lot of people ask, can I cook my meatballs in the oven, or is it a lot easier and a lot less mess-free doing it in the oven? Yes, it is, but we are missing out on a lot of flavor. We're missing out on that beautiful caramelized crust. And when you cook them in the oven, they kind of steam a little bit and it just completely changes the texture and taste. So I'm gonna get it on a very high heat because we wanna caramelize them. About a tablespoon of olive oil. That oil is piping hot, so I'm gonna add my meatballs in, and you don't wanna overcrowd the pan. So just do a few at a time. And try not to touch them in this step because we want to get that really nice caramelized base. We've got a caramelized crust now, so I'm going to flip these over and repeat on the other side. Now I'm going to take these meatballs, because they've got that beautiful caramelized crust, if I can show you on that side as well. I'm going to take them out of the pan. And because I wanted to get my sauce made up just to fasten up the process, I did do that in a separate pot, but this has so much beautiful flavor in the pan that I do not want to lose any of that flavor. Apparently it's called the fond, as my cameraman Lewis tells me. I don't know, let me know in the comments if that's correct, because I don't fully trust him on that one. But we are going to not let that go to waste. So I'm just going to scoop some sauce in. Oh, it's still very hot. So that pan was still very hot and that sauce did splutter, but you'll see that I'm able to deglaze the pan and just get all of that delicious flavor off. And we definitely need a lot more sauce than that, so we'll keep going. I'm going to change it to a smaller burner just because we don't want it at a rapid boil, we want it at a low simmer. Okay, so let's put these back in our sauce. We want them to be quite covered in the sauce. And now we're just gonna leave that to simmer until the meatballs are fully cooked. I reckon they'll need a fair bit of time, probably about 10-15 minutes because they're quite big. All right, I think these might be ready. I can just tell by the feel of them. They don't have too much of a spring. So I'm just gonna take it out and test it. Oh yes, perfect. It's a beautiful meatball. All right, so I'm going to take these off the heat and then we're going to plate them up. All right, so we've got those meatballs cooked, and I am going to show you how to turn them into a meatball sub as well, but I just want to show you how to plate it up in case you don't want to turn it into the sub. So I've got a little bowl. I'm just going to scoop some of that beautiful sauce in there with the meatballs. Probably go about 3. That's a good little meatball snack, I'd say. And then an extra sprinkling of cheese. I've got some basil, so I'm just going to put that on there just to lift the dish and brighten it a little bit, give it a little freshness. Yum, yummy. We've basically prepared everything we need for the meatball sub, but I'm gonna whip together a quick little pesto. So we're just gonna make a little mini batch today. So I'm only gonna need a small amount of garlic, just 1 clove. I've got some toasted pine nuts that are gonna go in there as well. A pinch of salt, and then I'm just gonna put in some fresh basil leaves, but as I said, I'm only making a little mini batch today, so I'm not gonna put all of this in. Oh, there is my cat being naughty. All right, so that's probably a large handful of basil, and I'm just gonna whisk this all together before I add in the olive oil and the cheeses. All right, that pesto is looking really good to me. We've got everything prepped for our sub, so now I'm just going to prepare it. I've got a beautiful soft white roll here that I've slightly toasted. And I'm going to get my meatballs. A little bit of that marinara sauce. Subway, eat your heart out. And then I've got some beautiful mozzarella cheese that I've just finely sliced. Nice big bit there. And I'm gonna put this under the grill or the broiler for about 5 minutes, just until that cheese has got it nice and gooey and melted. I've pulled that out of the oven. That cheese has melted, it's beautiful. And now I'm just gonna put a little bit of fresh pesto on there. A sprinkling of cheese. So you can never have too much cheese. All right, now I'm gonna cut in. Yum. Oh, look at that. There you have it, meatballs served 2 ways, in my rich tomato marinara sauce and in a meatball sub, which, to be honest, will beat Subway's meatball sub any day of the week. It is so delicious, and that quick pesto that I whipped together just really elevates it and brings it to new flavor heights. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe, and please let me know if you made either of these meatball recipes at home. I absolutely love hearing when you make my recipes. It really makes my day. So thanks for watching, and tune in next time.